Hello, welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's the Monday show on a Thursday with Andrew and Mark as we look back on a fantastic win for Newcastle United in the Champions League over PSV up at St James's Park. Newcastle went out deserved 3-0 winners against the Dutch champions. It was a performance of old from Newcastle United, high press, intensity, and when they got the ball moving with pace, drive and precision. It was also St James's Park at its very best. Everyone rising to the occasion. Goals from Yoane Wissa, Anthony Gordon and Harvey Barnes secured the points in what was a comfortable outing for Eddie Howe's men. It did potentially come at a cost with Bruno limping off before half-time, but in terms of standing, Newcastle have a real chance of an automatic pass into the next round of the Champions League. Mark, welcome back. How are you doing? You well? Enjoy the game last night?
I did. I feel as if I may as well have just slept in town because I didn't get out St James's until quite late, didn't get back home until about 11:30, 12:15, and then back in town early this morning for this. So I should have just I should just come to the office, slept over. But no, great night, a proper Champions League night at St James's, a proper European night that we all love under the floodlights. It's just something special, isn't there, about a European night under the floodlights? Yeah, great night and something to build on.
Certainly so. Let's start with the display from War Flags. Absolutely tremendous last night. There's been a lot of games, so it's so hard to do something special every single game. But I really did think they set the tone perfectly with their display. It was a pleasure to have the Chronicle play a big part in that with the use of our back pages from down the years. And the message was simple. Write the next headline. Like I said, it set the tone. Such a big night. And Eddie Howe mentioned this in his post-match presser as he thanked the fans for the atmosphere. And it was as good as I can remember for a wee while, Mark. And people talk about that Man City game a few weeks back, in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup and how flat the atmosphere was. And that could be matched with the flatness of the players in the opinion of some. But here, the fans, War Flags, threw the gauntlet down to the players with that pre-match display. And thankfully, the players rose to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it shows the importance of local media and print journalism still, without making it too much about that. But
let's do that. By the way, recording in our Newcastle studio, just for those that think we're based in Manchester or London, we're not. But I totally agree. That was one thing that popped into my head was, we get a lot of stick for a lot of things, but right there, I think showed you the power and the importance of local media and how iconic the back pages can be in an industry where, let's be honest, papers are having a tough time of it, but still a good back page will be kept for many, many years.
It will, yeah. I mean, I still remember iconic front pages as well when Newcastle first qualified for the Champions League, when Shearer signed, stuff like that, even up to the modern day, the takeover and stuff. You look at the Chronicles front and back pages then. But yeah, wonderful from War Flags as well. Again, we shouldn't forget these are volunteers giving up valuable time that could be spent elsewhere, producing moments like that. And I just think, not just this season, but ever since the initiative started, it's just been, you called it perfectly there, just a tone setter, and they just hit it perfect last night. The most iconic one will be the Carabao Cup final, because that was, I was moved to borderline tears with that one. Given the gravity of the situation. But last night was just perfect. And looking, I was in the Leazes, so I had a perfect view of it. I think I sent you the video of when the teams came out. And just trying to identify each back or front page took up most of my pre-match. Seemed to take away some of my nerves as well, which was good. But yeah, the crowd responded to it. It was a better atmosphere. There were little lulls throughout the game, but I think that was just maybe when things felt a little bit in the balance. Even at 2-0, it felt in the balance. But then I think that the players, you said, they responded massively and they wrote their headlines.
They certainly did. Let's get on with the team news. Once again, Lewis Miley on the bench. Yoane Wissa got the nod ahead of Nick Voldemare. But other than that, I think it was probably as expected. And I think it was clear from the picks that the game plan was going to be built around that intensity and that physicality.
Well, I spoke to Michael from Football Irani. Apparently that is how you pronounce it. I did ask.
On the View from the Opposition.
On the View from the Opposition. And he said that if it was a kind of a pure football match, then PSV would have a chance. When they might struggle is the physical side of it. And I thought Newcastle judged it perfectly last night, and I think Eddie Howe deserves massive credit for that. I did say on Monday and that I possibly would have looked to play Barnes on the left. Well, I said I would have looked to play Barnes on the left with Elanga on the right. And I stand by that. I still think I would have done that, But Anthony Gordon last night looked a bit more like the Anthony Gordon we expect. In the opening 15, 20, 25 minutes, both him and Yoane Wissa set the tone by pressing from the front. And it was notable when they were pressing, it was almost like Newcastle went into a kind of a 4-4-2 almost, where Gordon really was supporting, or Joelinton did it as well, which is something we spoke about quite a bit, about Joelinton being that one to, break into the area and stuff. And PSV just couldn't handle that press. Now, what I will say, from a sort of coaching point of view, Newcastle, it took a lot of bravery to press that high, because we know Dutch sides, and particularly one is in form as PSV, they can play through presses. They can, because they're such good technical teams, they can break that press. And when they break that press, we saw that at Liverpool, when they beat Liverpool 4-1 early in the season, when they break through that press, they are devastating. So it took a lot of bravery from Newcastle, and a lot of intelligence as well, when to press, how to press, who goes, who stays. Called it perfectly. It was a brilliant opening sort of half hour.
And if you're going to do that, you've got to back your players. The players have got to believe in themselves. That self-belief has definitely been lacking over the last few weeks, probably a few months. It was great to see how back his plan, back himself, and the players, like we say, rose to the challenge. And you could see very, very early on, I think it maybe caught PSV a little bit off guard. Newcastle were in their faces, chasing them down, and didn't give PSV a moment to really breathe. And then very early on, 7 minutes on the clock, the goal comes from Yoane Wissa, and it comes from Wissa putting pressure on the keeper, who kicks it straight to Bruno. Bruno gets it to Joelinton. Wissa comes back from an offside position. Joelinton gives it to Wissa, who puts it in the back of the net, keeps it down for his third goal at Newcastle United. And right there, you saw the importance of that pressing, because it just kind of panicked PSV into reacting, maybe in a way that they're not used to, where they have got plenty of time on the ball, especially back at home. Here, they weren't given it. It's led to the first goal. A brilliant moment for Wissa.
It was, and I don't want to get into a lengthy conversation about VAR by any chance, but it was quite nice to see the referee tell the VAR officials not to waste his time as well. No, look, I thought Wissa, his best game for the club comfortably. I thought he looked like the Yoane Wissa we thought he would be. And I think this is where we need to show patience with him, because we shouldn't forget he didn't really have a pre-season. Kind of through his own fault, we should say as well. He's come to Newcastle. He's got an injury. He's come back. He's not match fit just yet. But I thought last night was the first time I've looked and thought, you look as if you're approaching match fitness now. And there was a couple of times when he got away from players where he hadn't done that before, because he had that little burst of extra pace. You're right, the goal has come, yes, from Bruno and Joelinton, but from his initial press and forcing that error.
And having the desire to get back on side as well, because
Absolutely.
Many players would think, job done, I'm not going to get involved in this play. I'll just kind of be in the offside position. And yet he's gone, do you know what? I want to be involved. I want to get this goal. Comes back on and grabs it.
Can I ask your opinion on the finish? Because the commentators, when I watched the game back when I got in last night, said it was lucky.
Nah,
I mean, think he's meant it.
Obviously, I've watched it back, and I've seen people say he scuffed it. He hasn't. He's got good contact on it, and I think he's deliberately kept it down. I think it's very easy to miss that, to be quite honest with you. And I know as a £55 million striker, you shouldn't be missing those chances, but I think it's quite easy to put your foot through it, and that ends up high in the laser end, probably hitting you on the nose mark. So I think he's just done what a good striker does, kept it down, hasn't put too much power behind it. He's just put it exactly where it needs to be, over the keeper and into the back of the net.
Yeah, desire is a big thing for a striker. And I think, look, I wouldn't necessarily question his desire in his kind of first appearances for the club. But last night, it felt like for the first time, he went a bit extra. But I also think it's because he felt he could, because his fitness levels have gone up a bit. I know we're going to come on to it, but I think the second goal summed it up, where that ball probably wasn't his to win for Gordon, but he's gone in and done it. And I'll tell you what surprised me as well. When Newcastle went a bit more direct, was how many headers he wins. He won 5 or 6, I think, across both halves of football. And he wasn't just winning headers; he was directing them to teammates as well. And his hold-up play was incredible. This is where you're going to prove me wrong by looking at the stats and going, "No, Mark, he only won one header in the whole game. Shut up."
Well, he won 2 out of 5 aerial duels, but that's not to say that he didn't win any knock-ons. But yeah, it was a fantastic performance from him, and he does look like he's just got that extra step now. And I think that is because he's getting towards match fitness. And look, he's coming for some stick, his age, his price tag, his injury, and then some of the chances he's missed. But I've always said the more minutes he gets, the goals will come. And, his first in the Champions League will be a huge boost to that. 10 years ago, playing in the French 3rd division, and here he is wearing one of the most iconic number 9 shirts in club football, playing in the Champions League, scoring in it. There is so much more to come from him as well. I just thought he was brilliant. Tracking back, chasing men down, making the right runs when Newcastle were going forward. It was just a real solid performance from Yoane Wissa. And like I say, the best is yet to come from him. You're right, he then goes on to get the assist for the second goal as Gordon puts home from close range. And again, it's all about that pressing, isn't it? And it starts from Gordon this time, forcing the PSV to go over to the other side, him working in tangent with Wissa, and straight away Wissa's on top of the defender who has a bad touch, wins it, great tackle, squares it over to Gordon, who taps home. And look, it's not a goal that we'll remember in the years to come, probably the weeks to come. But right now, just reflecting on it, if we're talking about the importance of pressing and what you get from it, that goal sums it up.
It does. And you know what? Anthony Gordon's taken a lot of stick this season. And some of it's merited, by the way, because he hasn't hit the levels we expect. But in the Champions League, he's been incredible. His goal scoring record, I know there's been penalties, I get that. But they do count. Penalties are a pressure situation. Was it 6 goals in the Champions League this season?
6 goals in the Champions League campaign,
and now
which equals Alan Shearer's record from the 2002-2003 season. He's already got more goals and goal contributions than Shearer for that campaign. And I think, talking of the criticism, because he has come in for a lot of stick, because it is only 2 goals in the last 17 Premier League games, and there was penalties. Obviously, we're well aware of the record that he hasn't scored in open play since, I think it's last December. It's over a year anyway. It's not very good. What we have to hope is that his form in the Champions League eventually does click into the Premier League, because we've criticised him and now said he shouldn't have played. He shouldn't have started yesterday.
Both did.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that, and I've said he's had his chance. Give it to Elanga. I say that through gritted teeth, because I've defended Anthony Gordon when he first came and through some of the bad patches. He is so important to Newcastle United. I want him to do well. Of course I do. I want him to carry this form from the Champions League into the Premier League, because if he does, you will soon see Newcastle United not only fly up the table, but cement themselves as a proper challenger for the Champions League for next season. It's just not happening. But that goal last night that he scored, that comes from his hard work, because he starts the initial press, and that'll be a confidence boost. Hopefully the fans see what he can do. We all know what he can do, but just have to keep everything crossed that it does finally come into the top flight.
We can put it really simply here, which is that Newcastle United are a far better side when they have a fit, firing, and in-form Anthony Gordon. Now, yes, we have been quite critical of him, but I think we can back that up. I think what you can't question with him is his attitude, and he will keep going, and he will keep trying to improve. I look at him last night, and I thought, for the first time in a while, he was really willing to take his man on, to drive in the area, to get in and support the striker. And also, kind of a little bit of an underrated part of his game last night, I thought, was the fact that he was willing to get back and support Lewis Hall. Not that Lewis Hall needed support, by the way, because he was incredible, but he got back and did that bit. He did the dirty side of being a winger as well.
2 key questions here, because, as we say, hasn't happened in the Premier League. Does his form in the Champions League give him a pass to start, say, on Sunday and so on? Because let's be honest, if everyone's fit and firing, it's probably going to be Anthony Gordon. Even if he goes the next 3-4 Premier League games without getting a goal, he's going to start if he's fit. That won't please everybody. Do we treat them in isolation? Brilliant in the Champions League, shoe into start, Premier League, it's not happening, let's give someone else a go? Or do you treat them as, it's all as one? He's done that in the Champions League there. He's had a good midweek game. He'll do on Sunday against Villa.
I don't think Eddie Howe will say it that way. I think Eddie Howe will just say it as a game. He won't say competitions necessarily. When it comes to team selection, I think Gordon has the shirt now. Well, he has already, but you know what I mean? He's got the shirt for Sunday now. Unless there's, something comes out from the sports science guys who say
is that warranted, is my point, given it's the
so.
Premier League where he hasn't scored an open play?
I don't think it matters. I think it's confidence of a goal-scoring performance, of a positive performance. So I think, look, I do get it, the open player thing and the impact that he hasn't really had in the Premier League. But you can't tell me Anthony Gordon won't come out of that game last night feeling full of confidence in his ability. And you can't tell me Eddie Howe won't look at that and go, right, let's have more of that. We'll give you the shirt for Villa. Go and do it again. So I don't think that's how it'll say. Has he warranted that? I think so.
Do you think maybe part of the reason that he performed so well last night, even if we take the Champions League competition away from the question, is just the fact that Newcastle United were facing an opposition where the key component of the game plan was to press? For large parts of this season, teams have sat back, had that low block, which does impact players whose best ability, best attribute is to run at pace into space. But if you're facing a low block where they're just sitting back and absorbing the space, isn't really there to run into. And I think that does impact the likes of Anthony Gordon. But where your main focus is to hurry the opposition, to get into their face, and then suddenly the space opens up, that's where he's at his best. And I just think it's difficult, as we go back to that transition question, where Newcastle United going to. We know they want to be a team with more control, but you look at some of the players they've got, Gordon, Elanga, you can maybe throw Harvey Barnes into that mix. Are those players better in a counter-attacking team? Most certainly so. And that's going to be the challenge, bigger picture going forward. But again, last night we saw how good, when that is the game plan, Newcastle United are.
It's a really good point. A really good point of the opposition were a little bit different to what Newcastle faced. And again, Michael did reference that in view for the opposition. But I'd also say that part of it was the press from Newcastle. Kind of changed PSV's tactics to a degree. They started trying to go a little bit longer and a bit more direct at times, which isn't their natural game. You could tell that was kind of the case. I think Gordon, I think Eddie made this point in his post-match, didn't he, where he said the front three, I'd rather talk about them as a unit. And it's a really good point, because I think Harvey Barnes' pressing was excellent as well. And the front three last night, I think it's one of the, I don't think it would be beyond the realms of stretching the truth to say, the front three, it's probably the best front three performance we've seen this season as a whole, because every single one of them played their part. Obviously, every single one of them scored, but they all pressed really effectively. They all did their jobs in defensive areas when they had to. So you're right. The key for this Newcastle side to unlock their potential will come when someone does just sit back. And this is where, again, we go back to the bravery aspect of the game, where your Joelintons have to do what they did last night, where the wingers have to do what they did last night, and start forcing errors, and start, when you do that, you do put doubt into the mind of defenders or opposition. It's a bravery thing, I think, and that's what they've got to take forward. And Sunday will be a classic example of that.
Joelinton, we mentioned there, fantastic again.
Just brilliant.
In the middle. What a return to form this man is having. Just his physical presence alone rattles the opposition, and he's really returned with a bounce and a step, and it's superb to see. But also, probably the one criticism that you had of Joelinton was that he wasn't great at carrying the ball forward. He often had a really bad first touch, or he'd run down a blind avenue. And yet, since his return, that kind of element of his play has definitely improved. And we saw that. And we saw that really with the Yoane Wissa assist. Okay, he ends up on his backside after squaring it to him. But actually, it's controlled, it's measured, he's thinking about it. Whereas you could argue the Joelinton of old, as soon as that ball comes to him from Bruno, it's a first touch which lands him closer to the corner flag than it does the middle of the box. I just think Newcastle's upturning results and performances to a degree are down to that man suddenly finding his best form, black and white shirt, arguably in, you could say, since the cup final, really.
I thought he was an absolute force of nature last night. Whenever Newcastle looked in a little bit of trouble, granted it was rarely, he was there. I thought whenever PSV had a little bit of possession, generally Joelinton forced a turnover. There was a moment early in the second half, you mentioned the goal. There was a moment early in the second half where he's turned his man in midfield and he's played a brilliant pass to release Gordon in on goal. And I think Gordon should do better, by the way. But I looked at Joelinton last night and I thought, you're right, I don't think there's ever been any doubt in his ability to press and use his physicality and use his presence. But last night was the first time I feel when he's really, really affected a game in possession. There was a few times when he looked in trouble in midfield and he just somehow turned away from a man and opened the game up and allowed Newcastle to get on the front foot. It was a really brilliant performance, and you're right to point out his form since he's come back in. I would argue it's as good as we've seen Joelinton. And I think last night, and yes, we take into account the fact the opposition didn't have their best night. But also, it's quite easy to ignore the fact that Newcastle were just very good last night. I think this is something not us, but in society, we always look for the negative. And look, we've been guilty of that on here, by the way. I think I can be honest and say that. But sometimes you've got to give credit. So we could sit here and say PSV were rubbish. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. They didn't do this. They're not rubbish. They're a good side. They proved it this season against Napoli, against Liverpool. Newcastle forced them into those errors last night. Newcastle stamped their authority on the game last night, and we have to give credit for that. And a big part of it is Joelinton. He set the tone in midfield. He got Newcastle on the ball when they needed it, and he gave them so much authority in midfield. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that he's very, very vocal. And I don't know if you saw this from where you were sitting in the Leazer's end, but there was a Newcastle United corner, and Wissa was on the edge of the box as they were lining up to take it, as was Joelinton. And Joelinton was absolutely raging at Wissa, and he was gesturing, he was telling him to get into the centre of the box. And to be fair, Wissa didn't back down. He turned around. It was quite an interesting little barney. You know, they were both kind of at each other, which was quite interesting to see. But you just see Joelinton shouting and bawling. Whether anyone listens to him, I'm not too certain, but I would hope so.
I would.
But this is one where it surprises that Wissa was like, okay, then you want to start something, because Wissa won't backing down. I'll be running a mile, me personally. But that vocal tendency from Joelinton is so key. Whether it's trying to organise others, dragging others into the right position, having a little word with the referee, which he did last night at one point, and I think a few people got a bit nervous. But with the injuries to Dan Burn, obviously Kieran Trippier was out for a wee while as well. That is what Newcastle United have missed. And I think the return of Kieran Trippier a few weeks after Joelinton, and obviously we're going to get Dan Burn back in a few weeks as well. You know, if you take the footballing ability out of it and you just focus on the experience, the communication, and the want to be heard, but also I think the know-how to get the message across that Eddie Howe's probably delivering to certain players in the dressing room. You know, for Wissa and Joelinton were having a bit of a barney, I would assume through limited knowledge that it's come from something on the training pitch where they've practiced and Wissa's actually meant to be in the centre of the box, and for whatever reason he's gone against it, whether for whatever reason, good intentions at heart. But that's so important that Eddie Howe has got those lieutenants on the pitch now to deliver that message, and that's what's been missing for a large part of the season. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that actually Newcastle's upturn in form has also come at the same time where he's got these more vocal characters back onto the pitch to share the responsibility with the likes of Bruno.
You know, when we look at the best sides in Premier League history, and we go to the Arsenal Invincibles, the Chelsea side under Mourinho, various Manchester United sides, they haven't all always been best friends. They haven't always got on and off the pitch, but they've gone and done a job. And yes, there's conflict, but this is a group of grown men in a dressing room, all striving for better constantly. Now, that will bring conflict from time to time, and it's how you manage it and it's how you deal with it. And I get the feeling now these Newcastle players are demanding higher standards of each other. Now, I think you're probably right. I think whatever's been set for that set piece, someone's not doing the job. You would assume it was maybe Wissa, and Joelinton's the one taking command and saying, this is where you've got to be. Maybe for whatever reason, Wissa wasn't or didn't, or however it's played out. I didn't see this, by the way. I already saw it at the time. Sorry, I saw it on the rerun of the game. I don't mind it.
Oh, I'm all for it. It definitely wasn't me criticising.
Obviously, we don't want to go too far.
No, but he did it a few weeks ago with Bruno, the captain. You know, he told him to go mark someone else. Again, maybe it's the instruction or whatever it is. But I'm all for it. And also, what I liked as well with Joelinton, there was a chance late in the second half, and it's been scuffed or whatever. And he's angry that chance is being missed. Now, look, it's easy to miss a chance, of course it is. But what I like is that is kind of the standard that's been set. You know, he wants Newcastle United to do well. He wants to see his team convert these chances that are coming to whoever it might be. Him back in this form, so important. But just that vocal element is absolutely crucial to what Newcastle United are going to do going forward, especially if they're going to be without Bruno for a few games. We don't know. He went off just before the interval. Eddie Howe said it was swelling on his ankle, and that was a worry that he had to go off at the time of recording. We don't have a diagnosis. But the last thing Newcastle United need, given how important Bruno's been this season, how important he is, when things have not been going well, he is the man, as we've said plenty of times on this show, that just drags the team forward. Now he's getting people back around him who can share that responsibility. The last thing we need is to lose him, even just for a couple of games. So fingers crossed, it's nothing to worry about, but it would be a big blow if indeed he did come off with a serious injury.
It would. I think we've said a number of times it has been his best season in a black and white shirt. His influence on the team is so clear to see. Going back to linking in what you were saying before, don't think he's the most vocal of captains, but does lead by example and allows some others, experienced members of the squad, to be a bit more vocal. Now, the one thing I will say, and I'm not saying these players will have the impact that Bruno will if he is missing, but it could hand an opportunity to a Lewis Miley. It could hand an opportunity to a Jacob Ramsey to come in. But at the same time, then I would expect Tonali and Joelinton to maybe just raise their levels even further and take a bit more responsibility and take command of that midfield. I thought Tonali last night was really good, by the way. I thought he looked like the Tonali that we know he can be. His energy levels looked a bit higher, which fair play to him, having a 2-week-old in the house, by the way. Fair play to him for that. But on the ball, he was good. Out of possession, there was plenty of drive and determination, and he was as important as Joelinton. So I think if Bruno is out, it offers an opportunity for someone to put down a marker.
But it's a big mental hurdle, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We know the record. When Bruno doesn't play for Newcastle United, they don't tend to win. But agree with you on Tonali. There was a moment in the second half where had that short burst of speed down to the corner that they were defending, gets the ball, and I think he ends up winning a throw. And that's not what we've seen in recent weeks from him. Often what he'll do is he kind of just glides, and then suddenly bang, it's a kind of a 20, 30-yard sprint to get there ahead of the opposition. And that hasn't been on show in recent games. It was there last night. So again, small building blocks to hopefully better things to come from Tonali.
And it goes down to what I always say, which is it's form. It's not ability. We know he's capable. It's form.
Who had 30 minutes on the bingo cards, ladies and gents? He said it.
But it's true.
Well, we're going to get on to your other favourite topic now.
Oh, please do.
Mr. Lewis Miley. Now, the first question I want to ask is that once again, he was on the bench, and this is probably the biggest debate going when it comes to team news of late, because in the last month, he's been their best player without question for me. Obviously, Eddie Howe has all the stats and sports science, so if he says it's down to fatigue, it's down to fatigue. But do you also think there may be an element that Lewis Miley hasn't started the last couple of games because he is the first reserve at right back and at centre back? So Eddie Howe can't really risk him, because if Botman goes down, if Chow goes down, or Trippier, then he has to turn to Lewis Miley.
I think it's just managing game time. Now, could Lewis Miley play the next 10 games in the space of 30 days, whatever it is? No, he couldn't play 10 games in a row. There's very few players will. I think that there's going to have to be rotation. What I will say is that I think Lewis Miley now has the 100% trust of his manager, that he knows he can put him in any position. I think there was a need last night, because of Newcastle knowing the type of side they were facing, to have just that little bit more experience in the back four in terms of playing Trippier at right back. And I thought he had a really good game last night, Trips, despite what the guy sitting behind me in the Leazer's end said constantly throughout the game. I love his vocal presence at right back, and it was notable throughout the game that he was consistently talking to the two centre-backs and almost, I'm not going to say coaching them through the game because they don't need that, but just keeping them in line, keeping that discipline. In terms of Miley, I thought when he came on, he was excellent, by the way. His ball retention, his intelligence in possession was incredible. Lewis Miley will have a big part to play over these coming weeks. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up playing against PSG.
Do you think it was quite telling that with Bruno going off injured, he turned to Lewis Miley rather than Joe Willock or Jacob Ramsey, or was it because of the team they were playing?
No, I think it was really telling. And I think what that would tell me is that when Bruno goes, sometimes Newcastle lose a bit of control in midfield. Now, if I was looking to a Newcastle midfielder away from the main three, if you want to call them that, that's not what Eddie Howe would want them to be called, but you know what I mean, the senior three. Who would you feel more uncomfortable in possession of a ball? Because I think it would be Lewis Miley quite comfortably, because his use of the ball, his ability to retain possession is absolutely top draw. And I think we saw that when he came on. I'm not going to say you didn't notice Bruno was there, because Bruno is a world-class midfielder. You're going to notice he's not there. But his absence, the impact of his absence was limited by the way Lewis Miley came on. The phrase I would use for Lewis is no fuss. Just gets on with it.
No frills.
Yeah, to a degree. But he just gets on with it. Do you want me to play right back? Yeah, go on then.
Well, there was a moment last night when he went to right back where he chases the ball down, and he ends up winning a throw-in from such a, like, he's so close to the touchline. He's really got no right to win it, but he managed somehow to not only control the ball and then play it off the defender. And it was just a little thing, and you go, this kid's like 19. Like that's a really experienced thing to do, because it kills the play. Newcastle United, instead of having to defend a throw, and now a throw to go up the pitch, and it was just a little moment like, you go, yeah, well, we know how good he is, but it impressed me. He also, of course, got the armband, didn't he, off Kieran Trippier, which was a really nice moment. Before we get your take on it, let's hear from Eddie Howe, who was asked about it in his post-match press conference.
Yeah, very much so. I think he is potentially a future captain of the football club, which for someone so young is a big statement to make, really. But I think it was a spontaneous moment from Kieran to give him the armband. I wanted to protect Kieran and try and give him the best chance to stay fit, so I thought it was the right time to withdraw him, and he's given the captaincy to Louis. But it was actually quite a poignant moment and a nice one for Louis and his family, and I thought he was excellent again when he came on today.
So Eddie Howe there saying it was a poignant moment for Kieran Trippier to give Lewis Miley the armband, and he was asked whether he's a future leader of Newcastle United, a future captain, and Eddie Howe said he could see that happening. I mean, I know the answer to this question, Mark, but you agree, right?
It's a new feature again, isn't it? The Lewis Miley appreciation moment.
We need a jingle.
We do. Firstly, what a brilliant thing for Kieran Trippier to do as a senior player, as someone who's been there and done it throughout his career. Because let's be honest, that armband could have went to several players before it went to Lewis Miley, but to go and give it to a young player, a local player, it feels pointed towards the academy as well. I think that's a big thing, and I know obviously I watch a lot of the academy and such, like with the 21s and obviously the 18s, but it feels like a big moment for them to have one of their players, the same way as it did when Sean Longstaff wore it on a couple of occasions. It feels like a big moment for them. But when I saw it happening, it was interesting because the crowd at first hadn't noticed what had happened, but then as Trippier's gone off and walked past Miley and they saw him with the armband on, I thought it was a lovely reception that he got. And he's one of our own, went round.
It goes back to that trust element.
Of course it does.
Because Newcastle United are comfortable, they've won the game, but you've still got to be professional. And yet, in that moment, they've turned to a 19-year-old to get the armband. It's not a little thing. It's very significant because you have senior pros there who could have that armband. Probably if you had a list in any other game, Miley would be right down the list to have that. But in that moment, that shows trust. And it's a big thing from Trippier to do that. Very clever as well. But for Miley, he's earned that. And he's definitely a future Newcastle United captain.
But you know what? Even if he'd never captains Newcastle United again, nobody can take last night away from him. Nobody can take that moment, that having the armband in a Champions League game at a sold-out St. James's Park. Brilliant. Just such a moment. And, you being a dad as well, can you imagine being his parents or his brothers sitting there at St. James's Park watching him as a 19-year-old captain his hometown club?
I wonder how that went when they were watching it. Was it kind of like a tap on the shoulder from one? He's got, no, really? Oh, he has, he has.
I think I would have just burst into tears if it was my son. I mean, what a moment.
Think that they keep the armbands? Does Lewis take that home with him?
If I was him, I'd be making sure I did. I'd probably be getting a few players to sign it as a keepsake.
You've got the kit man this morning going, anyone seen it? Anyone know where it's gone? And it was, no,
I definitely gave him it back. I don't know. No, but look, it's a brilliant moment. And obviously, I think it's been announced. I hope it has anyway. He's been awarded the North East Football Writers Young Player of the Year, which is another great moment. So you'll get that at the ceremony in early March. So just another great occasion, great moment in the ongoing rise of a player who, in case it's escaped your attention, I rate quite highly.
You do indeed. In the second half, then Newcastle, of course, looking for the third. I felt they should have had a penalty. Miley crosses the ball into the box for Wissa and shouts and nudges him off the ball as Wissa is airborne. And some people will be shouting now at the screen, at the speaker, saying, I'm too soft. But I thought it was a really bit of dangerous play from the defender because Wissa is up in the air. He's above him. His first intention is to knock him out of the way. It's only a little tap, but he sends Wissa flying. He then wins the header. For me, though, that is a stonewall penalty. It's a really dangerous play.
I'm guessing some would say it's clever defending.
It's not clever.
I know, but some will. I'm not saying I do.
I'm not having that. He could have really hurt himself.
I know he could have done, but, this is football. People do get hurt. No, look, you're right. You're right. It's one of the best at it is Harry Kane when he's going. And Newcastle have seen it, by the way, with various defenders throughout the years, where there will just be a little movement towards the defender, a little push or a little anything to put them off balance. Yeah, I can see. I think it would have been soft, if I'm honest, but I can see why you think it should have been a penalty. But isn't it nice to be talking about Newcastle really committing players in the area and really committing in that final third instead of, oh, well, the ball's gone in, but there's only Baltimore in there.
Well, we spoke about it earlier in the week, didn't we? Who's gambling? Who's in there? Who's busting a gut, as John Anderson said? Well, there was Wissa in the right place at the right time.
But he wasn't the only one in the box. You had several. It was good. It's much better.
Barnes grabs the third just after the hour mark, and it's a totally different type of goal to what we'd seen with the previous two. Long ball down, Joelinton looking to nod it on. The defender gets it, but it goes back. Barnes in the central position, picks it up, skips past a couple of players. That bursts speed into the box. Delight to see. And he puts it home for his 12th goal of the season now, Newcastle's top scorer. And interestingly, if you look at the average position map from Wednesday night, Barnes is playing just behind Wissa in what you would say is a number 10. Now, it didn't seem like that watching the game. I don't know, did you feel like that was his average position?
No, but I feel as if that probably tells you more about the fact that he was willing to come in more.
It was very fluid, wasn't it?
I love the goal. His intent with his first touch to get that ball out in front and just drive. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of Harvey Barnes, I never think of someone with lightning pace. He's not a Gordon or Elanga. When he's on the ball and driving, he just kind of a bit like Steven Gerrard used to. it's the power, isn't it? It's the power of his run, and it's a great finish. I don't think we speak enough of Harvey Barnes' numbers. I know you've just mentioned it.
I've spoken about them.
I'm just double checking here, but so 12 goals and 2 assists in 33 appearances this season. Now that's just under 1 every 2 games, which is unbelievable, really. In the Champions League, 5 goals, which I spoke about Anthony Gordon's numbers. Now Barnes's, I think, haven't been penalties. They've all been, but none of them been penalties. So 5 and 7 and an assist as well. These are serious numbers. And I sort of half joked last night with the guy sitting beside me at the game, talking about the whole thing we've spoke about, Barnes for Scotland. He's putting up numbers that really rank alongside anything else in terms of the England squad at team level, at club level. Now, going at the bigger picture at Newcastle since he's come in, he's got 26 goals in 96 games, which is incredible for a winger who hasn't always been part of the starting lineup. And then you throw in 10 assists in that. These are unbelievable numbers and show why he is now, I would say, one of Newcastle's most important players. No matter what side he plays on, I'd personally prefer to see him on the left because I think that's where he's more comfortable. But no matter where he goes now this season, he's been outstanding at times. And his goal last night summed up everything good about Harvey Barnes. Great finish as well. I know it looks simple, but he's got defender closing him down. He's got the keeper coming out. Such a calm finish. And I don't know about you, but as soon as he's made that run and got in the box, I was already up because I thought, he scored here.
Well, that's the confidence, isn't it, that he's got, that we've got in him, that always hasn't been the case, because there have been chances last season one-on-one and he scuffed it, but he's just a man in full flow, and every time he gets in the box you think he's going to do something special. And it was a really nice goal. I really enjoyed his run, and I would say the pace he doesn't always show, but they just couldn't get near him, and fantastic form he's in, and long may it continue. Let's talk about Anthony Elanga now. I want to talk first about the reaction from the crowd singing his name. So important. Don't underestimate what a difference that will make to Anthony Elanga. He won't be immune to the criticism that has come his way, and he will know that he hasn't cut it. That price tag means he can't forget what's expected of him. Players see and they hear the criticism, but they also feel that love. And to have the stadium serenading him, I think that could be a turning point for Anthony Elanga mentally. Everybody just wants to feel wanted, and he's felt that now. And hopefully that just helps him relax. He trusts himself, stops trying too hard, because I think that is what often happens. And he just does what he does best: get the ball, take players on, use that pace. Really, really potentially significant moment for Anthony Elanga at Newcastle United.
There's been a lot said on social media, a lot written about the atmosphere at St. James's and how maybe at times this season hasn't been quite where it should be. But there were little moments last night I thought that were just right. And this was one of them. I mentioned the Lewis Miley thing when he's got the armband, that he's one of our own going around and stuff like that. And when Joelinton did good moments, or Tonali did good moments, their songs going. Mark Chow the same. From the minute Elanga came on, there's no way he can't have noticed the support from, look, if I'm honest, largely the Gallagher. That's where it started and stayed, with other areas of the ground joining in. And I don't know if it was just me, and I hope I'm not just searching for something here, but I felt as if there was just a little bit more from him last night. He looked a bit more confident in possession. He looked a bit more willing to go and close down. And there was one when he's gone and pressed high and forced an error. Newcastle won the ball back. And everyone reacted to it. And I feel as if, one, that's what we need more from him going forwards. But it just felt as if we saw a little bit more confidence. There was that run that he made left-hand side of the area, and he's had the shot that's just gone over. I don't think he makes that without the confidence in him. So I think we are starting to see, and we've said this before, and a lot of people have said this before, when you reference back to Anthony Gordon, his first 6 months at the club weren't great. He didn't hit the levels we expected. But I feel like it does take time to settle into an Eddie Howe side. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Elanga. He's been in and out with injuries. Look, he hasn't done anything near where we expect him to be. But I hope, with the help of the crowd, this can just be a little bit of a foundation to build on.
Yeah. And I think it was potentially even more significant because actually his first action in the game wasn't great. He runs the ball out of play. And I think that is a very important moment because you can either go down the avenue, which we've seen in recent weeks where there is quite vocal criticism from the stands, or everyone gets behind him. Everyone got behind him. And then all of a sudden we see this great cameo from him. You know, we're not saying he's where he needs to be, nowhere near, but it's a small building block in what potentially could be. And Eddie Howe was asked about the reaction to Elanga, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, Eddie, on Anthony Elanga, the crowd were chanting his name. He talked about the energy there. That was a nice moment. Could you give a few words on that, please?
Yeah, a lovely moment. And I just think, again, a massive thank you to the crowd for that, because we want to create a football club that's sort of in love with each other. We need the crowd to love the players. We need the players to love the crowd, and that relationship is so important. And that's why I ask the crowd to try and give positive energy in every moment, even when it's really difficult and challenging to do so. I understand the emotions that everyone feels during games, and I thought it was a huge statement from the supporters. And I think Anthony then responded with his performance in the last two games has been really, really good. So I think harmony and unity is so important. So massive thank you to everyone involved in that.
So there was Eddie Howe thanking fans for serenading Anthony Elanga, saying that unity and harmony really, really important. It goes back to the point that I made right at the beginning of the show. It just felt like everyone was on the same page last night, and hopefully, that can kickstart what is left of the campaign. It sounds daft to say that, given Newcastle United are only a few points off the top five and what have you, but it's been very stop-start in certain elements of the campaign, and you just think if we can just replicate what we saw last night in terms of fans and the players and the way they're playing, of course, the opposition has to be taken into account and what have you, but it just feels like that this is a reminder of how good Newcastle United can be under Eddie Howe. Now the challenge is to do that week in, week out.
Yeah, and that's kind of felt like the challenge right the way through the season, hasn't it? And I mentioned it on Monday. It's been a slog of a season with, a few highs, a few notable lows. But they are heading into the final 3-4 months of the season. Now, at very least in the knockout stages of the Champions League, could be in the last 16. They have a chance to get through to the fifth round of the FA Cup, albeit in a very tough test. They have reached, no matter what happens at the Etihad, they have reached the last four of the Carabao Cup. They're in a very good position to attack the Champions League places during the final months of the season. So despite everything that's gone on, despite the fact they haven't found consistency, despite the fact they had a bit of what many people would say is a below par summer, they are starting to show signs of coming together. Now, I don't think we should get carried away, and Eddie Howe would be the first one to say you don't get carried away by the highs or the lows. Everything's on the level. The amount of times I hear that from managers at every level. I've written it 4 times this morning in previews of weekend games. It's true, though. You can't get too carried away. Eddie Howe won't get too carried away, and we shouldn't. We just have to make sure that everyone stays together, as Eddie says. Everyone is united, and just go and attack the final 3-4 months of the season, because it's still, despite everything that's gone on, it still can be a very, very special season.
Yep, lots to play for. Up to 7th in the Champions League table and a real chance of getting through to the next stage, which is absolutely fantastic. We spoke in there about harmony and unity, and Eddie Howe mentioned it then in his post-match press conference. I have to say, one of only 2 negatives to come out of last night, the first being, as you've mentioned, Bruno, was some of the reaction on social media. Fans who've got unbreakable faith in Eddie Howe digging out fans who raise questions about the manager, and it's irked me slightly. Here on this podcast, Mark, we always said how we'll get it right and Newcastle will click, but there were questions over the setup, a selection, in-game management. I think all fair questions to ask. I've backed Wissa, I've backed Elanga, but I also understand why people are being critical of them. To have an opinion is absolutely fine. Criticism, I think, is absolutely fine if it's fair and if it's balanced. And I think for the most part of the last few weeks, asking those questions about how and others has been perfectly fine. even if I don't agree with it, even if you don't agree with it, even if our viewers and listeners don't always agree with it. But what I don't agree with is some fans accusing other fans of being unhappy Newcastle United have won, because it means, how did something right? It's just daft to say that. It was a great performance on a night that was huge, because we can't get away from the fact that Newcastle really needed to win last night if they were going to progress. And also the bigger picture of momentum. The club needed everyone on board, fans and players, and they were, and it was fun and it was comfortable, and it was just a nice night up at St James's Park. But I still think it's okay to ask, why did you do that on Wednesday night and not against Man City in the Carabao Cup first leg? Why didn't you do it against Wolves? You can celebrate the win on Wednesday and be happy with the performance and praise it as we have done, as well as ask some questions that some might say are negative ones. It's fine. And alongside that, also wanting Newcastle United to do well, which is the bottom line for everybody, right?
But this is a nice little microcosm of modern society. And look, we could go into a far deeper conversation here about social media and the fact that it's instant, and the fact that everyone's opinions are now out there, rather than 25 years ago where we probably sat in a pub and had discussions in friendship, amongst friends, rather than this big world network that we have now with social media. It's a really complicated world now in terms of being on social media, and in terms of, it used to be just a bit of a laugh and a bit of fun, and we'd all laugh and joke on there. But now this is where it's at, and it can be quite divisive. And because of the season Newcastle have had, where the highs have felt really high and the lows have felt really low, and this is this is where I go back to being on the level, and why I try not to get carried away by anything. And it may come across as boring, and there may be other outlets out there that like to put out kind of shock DJ vibes, where it is, let's make a controversial opinion and we'll get people talking. I know that's our job at the end of the day, to get people talking, but I'd rather stay true to what I think, which is trying to stay balanced in everything. I don't mind anyone criticizing. I don't mind anyone being enthusiastic about something or positive, as long as it's all done with measure. And that's where people sometimes get away from that. There are people in our industry who get away from that. There are journalists who get away from that. They will sensationalize. They will, and that's negative or positive, by the way. They will overplay the positives. They will overplay the negatives even. And it comes across on social media where people, everything you say has to be done with balance. 100% you can say, and we said it Monday, Newcastle United weren't good enough on Sunday. They weren't. They couldn't find their way through the worst defence in the Premier League. We can sit here and say they were very, very good against a good PSV side last night. And again, I go back to the outlook of the game. I go back to people saying PSV were terrible. Was that the only reason Newcastle won last night? The only reason Newcastle won last night because the PSV were terrible? Did Newcastle not force them into errors? Did Newcastle not take advantage of the game? Did they not take a stranglehold of the game at times? Of course it did. But this is the modern society we live in. As I say, at any level of the game, and I cover several levels, you've always got to give balance. Now, there are some former Newcastle players who work in non-league football who I admire greatly, and I speak to them every week. I spoke to one on Tuesday night, Mike Williamson, who was now at South Shields, and spoke to him about things in the past where he does this roller coaster analogy. If you're living life based on the ups and downs, you're just never going to be happy, because you'll just always expect another down. Just be measured, just be measured in every single approach, every single verdict, every opinion. But that's not the way the world is.
No. And just remember, I think
that was a rant. Sorry.
That's fine. That's what I was going for, because I had one as well. I think the bottom line is everybody just wants Newcastle United to be successful, and everybody's opinion matters. But let's just be nice to each other. Newcastle United have won. I mean, if you first thought it was to dig someone out, I don't know why you're doing that. But let's celebrate the victory. Let's celebrate the performance, and let's hope that this is the moment that they build on such a good performance, and we go into Sunday against Villa and we win, and then we go to Paris and we put in a good performance and secure the spot in the next round of the Champions League. Momentum.
Sorry, no matter what happens in Paris next week, for the first time in their history, Newcastle will be in the knockout phase of the Champions League. I saw someone describe it last night as a small step for the club. No, it isn't. It's not a small step. It's a massive step. This competition, you are facing the best teams in Europe, some of the biggest clubs in world football. Newcastle this season have gone head-to-head with Barcelona and give them a good game at St. James's. They've gone head-to-head, or they will be, with PSG, the reigning European champions. It's no small step to get into the knockout phases, even if it is, and I use this half-jokingly, just the knockout, the playoff round. Imagine at the start of the season, we said Newcastle will be in the knockout phases of the Champions League. Of course you would have taken it. It's a huge step for the club. Huge, financially as well.
Massive prestige, as well as the money that comes in. So plenty of games to look forward to. Big thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring the podcast. You can click the link in the podcast description box to get a discounted offer on your NordVPN plan. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. One subscription can be used across 10 devices, and it'll keep you safe while browsing on public Wi-Fi. Mark will be back tomorrow. What day? Yeah, tomorrow with View from the Opposition. All the games rolling into one as he looks ahead to the game with Aston Villa with Dan Rollinson from the Clout and Blue podcast. I'll be back with Gibbo later today for the match preview. And then me and Mark will be back on Monday, hopefully celebrating all 3 points for Newcastle United against Villa up at St. James's Park. Enjoy the week, enjoy the content, do it, thumbs up, do it, subscribe, do leave us a comment or two, and we'll get back to you. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys very soon.